Has everybody heard about the Jesus going to India theory? This idea is that between the ages of 12, when Jesus was in the temple and wowing the wise men, from there till about the age of 30, he just disappears off the scene. And people wonder, what happened in Jesus' life during this gap right here? My name is Dan Paulson, and I'm going to talk about that in this video. If you go to YouTube and just look, I'm not going to post any links. I'll post some names. If you want to look, you can. There are videos on this. There's a guy named Paul Wallace that has an entire 5-part series. But if you look through his material, it's all kind of like Gaia stuff, foil hat, space aliens and creatures under the sea kind of stuff. So when you start going Jesus in India, you're in that camp of thinking right here. So, all right. Well, there's people that are really into that and just try to figure out what did happen. I mean, Jesus was gone from how many years there? Where did he go? Of course, I have had Christians tell me in its simplest form that he was the son of a carpenter. After that 12-year-old thing, before his ministry started, he was obviously working with his dad, building things with wood. Of course, there's no story of that. You're just, that's the truth is we don't know. It also is conspicuously heavy on, there's some cross-sharing going on there, but there's a lot of idea in some people's camp that Jesus is the one that went there and taught. He was the master, and he went and shared some things with them, all right, and learned some things. To me, if I look at it and make comparisons and step back and look at a bigger picture, what I see is that someone like Jason is saved as a youngster and then gets sent off for training, and at some point he just appears and he's ready to go. We've got Jesus here who is saved at birth, who is wowing he's got a lot of wisdom. He's got things on the ball. What do we have with Marduk? Bigger eyes, bigger ears, bigger sense of things. There's this idea that whoever this called person is has a greater sense of what's going on, as well as the idea that then he reappears when it's time to go on the adventure. That's a common theme. All right. When we get to the end of the video, I'll show you what I know. But in the meantime, what I want to do is say that there's a lot of comparisons between material. I'm going to show you a couple of verses, one of them from the Bhagavad Gita, one of them from the book of Matthew in the Bible. And they sound so similar that you would look at that and based on timing go, well, Jesus must have learned from the gurus from India. Let's take a look at something here real quick. What I have is, first of all, the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41. And I'm using, that's very specifically related to the Eknath Eswaran translation. And this material at the most recent was 2nd century before the Common Era, before Christ, before Jesus. And I'm going to be comparing between that and the book of Matthew, which we know is more recent vintage, less than, but maybe as much as getting close to 2,000 years old, but not quite there yet, getting close. So obviously the Jesus material is more recent. All right, let's read something from the Bhagavad Gita. And then I'm going to go straight into a parallel verse into Matthew. They don't sound exact, but listen carefully. Those who follow this path, resolving deep within themselves to seek me alone, attain singleness of purpose. For those who lack resolution, the decisions of life are many-branched and endless. Matthew. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow, and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. All right, we're going to interpret those, and I didn't set this up. What I did is I read those right off the bat, knowing that did you look at those as I read them and go, oh, wow, what is that? That sounds the same. Or did you go, what is he talking about? Yeah, I don't get it. Okay, if you're the person that saw it, you can get it. If you're the person that didn't see it, it's there. And I don't know what to do to tell you to see it. It's conceptual. There's something going on, but let's set it up. These are both spiritual teachings that turn inward to the mind. And we're looking for one single thing in what there is. Jesus is going to teach that, looking for one sheep, looking for one fish, making the two into one. And all of that are parts of a teaching that has to do with making sure that we are of a of a mind, of a thinking, of a processing, of a peace, inner peace and tranquility, that we don't have inner parts of us that are acting out or that we're confused, that we just feel peace. Even if you're not acting out, but you're sitting there feeling in turmoil, we have a conflict. That is not the unity that we're looking for. So we're looking for that oneness. No matter who is teaching you, that's what you're looking for. So there's one way to do that, by turning inward to the mind, really, to the memories, to the perceptions, and to change those perceptions to heal from them. It's the only way that you get past them, is to resolve them by changing the way we feel about the past. That's a difficult thing to do. It's a rare thing to do because it's not comfortable. It's hard, and people are afraid to do that. Okay, let's read them again with that in mind. This time I'm going to go through an interpretation process as we go through it. And let me just say that the interpretation process is something that I developed over years. I kept looking at the material from antiquity, various things that look similar. And there was something there that I don't know what it was. Patterns, I could see patterns deeper than most people could. And that's just the way the head works sometimes. I'm not good at other things, so it's nothing special. It's just your skill sets. Okay, so what I did in these stories is I kept playing, somehow I kept finding ways to fit them into parts of my mind, my higher self, this awareness that's detached, my consciousness, my experiences, my memories, and I kept test-fitting pieces and parts until no matter between what story that I went to from antiquity and I read them conceptually, they were all consistently doing the same thing. I found a template that they were framed upon, and then you realize that it's framed on the human life experience. And then as you're doing that, you're actually learning to read these conceptually. I'm going to make up my own verse. An anchored ship can only sail around its anchor. There's a verse that I made up right there that doesn't sound like anything to anybody until you get to the point that you always read these like, this is a spiritual verse, it's conceptual, I'm the ship, the anchor's what I'm hanging on to, and I'm going to cycle around it over and over again. As soon as you start reading them like that, they open up. But that's what you have to do. That's what it takes. And you have to train your brain to do it. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. You can't see this unless you can read it for yourself. You can listen to somebody, but okay, let's go interpret, and I'm going to use that process right there. That's what you're observing. Those who follow this path, resolving deep within themselves to seek me alone. Okay, we're seeking the higher being. We're seeking connection with the higher self to live through that. That's where we are detached from our emotions. Attain singleness of purpose. Yeah, we just want to live one way. For those who lack resolution, for the people that aren't going to do it, the decisions of life are many, branched, and endless. There's so many possible ways to turn outward and explore life, to have supernatural, and to just proceed thinking you know what? When we're interpreting like I am here, it's a very science-minded interpretation. It's a thought experiment, and it's done so objectively. It's not done so with the idea of, here's what exists. My purpose in life is to look through material until I find something that somehow supports my belief. And that is what most minds do. That's what theistic minds do. I have a belief in place. I'm going to dismiss anything that doesn't shore it up and grasp or morph, twist, interpret anything I can. When we're seeking for this, we don't do that. This is what's reality? I don't know what's there. Don't tell me there's something supernatural that I can never see, and these little things are just evidence to that. No. Show me what's really there. There is something there. There is. But it's in here. It's not out there. Those who follow this path, resolving deep within themselves to seek me alone, attain singleness of purpose. For those who lack resolution, the decisions of life are many branched and endless. Let's go to Matthew. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. So here we have an isolation. We've got not many people are going to do it. There's a narrow gate. The narrow gate is always, entering through the narrow gate is always turning inward. It's a threshold. In the material, in a monomyth, it would be a threshold to cross. The gate is a threshold. It's a mental space. It's instead of looking out at the world and going, oh, why is everything so messed up out there? You begin to realize, you're the person that realizes that that is a screen to the filtering that is in your mind. And that if you stop looking outward and turn inward and start looking at the filtering, that the screen changes. But you have to do this up here. So, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there's many who take it. Most people do that. But the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Okay, so you can see that teaching is the same, basically. It has different verbiage. I think an argument could be made that it sounds like it came from one source. I look at this right off the bat, though, and I've read so many different things that I realize that when you find something like a flood between the Enuma Elish from Babylonia and Genesis in the book of Genesis, Noah's flood, or what's called Noah's flood, you say those are very similar. How do you address those things? And some people say that's evidence that the flood was actually global. If a number of people have written about it, that's more and more evidence that it happened. The reality of it, though, is if you look through it, it fits in a part of the story where if you were on a Greek myth and it was time to defeat creatures, monsters, or something like that, what we're doing here is destroying the world. When you play it out in the psyche, it doesn't mean you're destroying the world. It means you're destroying the world that is your experience. You're destroying your world. You're starting over. It's a rebirth. And that's a perfect analogy, actually. Imagine this is the Fertile Crescent, but there's floods yearly. But in between the floods, there's animals and people and activity, and it's you got the river for flowing. I'm sure they're keeping things clean as possible, but before a flood came through, it would probably activate your gag reflex to walk through that place in many places. And a flood would just clear that out. That would be so symbolic of, this represents myself. My life was so trashed, and now I've washed it out. I've washed myself. I've washed it away. What ultimately you see here is not something that happened, but that in a storytelling culture that is hundreds of years going on, and in some cases thousands of miles distance between them, these are shared story components. That's a good idea. I'm going to use it over here because it fits with ours. Other ones may not. We don't want it to sound the same. It's going to continue to repeat. So in the background, somebody that knows has this template built in, knowing that not many people are going to find it. If you start looking at something like Jericho being destroyed, and you realize that's the same thing too, that Jericho, in one story, the earth represented your earth. In this case, Jericho is a city that represents your structure, who and what you are, your basic framework, the mental experiences that we're living through that need to be destroyed. That suddenly they open up even more than what people see. And of course, people would say, well, they're historically accurate. Jericho is there; it's destroyed. Yeah, they used it in the story. Obviously, it's there. I would say the archaeological evidence does not prove anything supernatural. What it proves is that that's when the story was made, and it's an element that they used that fits in the same place on that template. So when we get to the Jesus material, the same thing is happening. I recognize Jesus as a character on a monomyth. And if you have followed my work, you'll know that the Abrahamic material uses a numbering system to obscure this repeating pattern. It's developed all the way up in the first creation story on day 7, where day 7 is said 3 times. I've got videos up on that. I'll post the link. The 3 and 7 becomes basis for a numbering system. And then the 12s are part of it as well. We got 12 tribes of Israel. We've got 12 is one of the most, 3, 7, 12, 40. It's one of the most predominant numbers in the Bible. If you go through, they're repeatedly being used, but they're being developed as analogous terms right up at front in Genesis. His family looked for Jesus for 3 days. There's one of the numbers. He was 12 years old. There's one of the numbers. And 30 is another one of the numbers in the analog. And it was approximately 30 years old when he started his ministry. And then right after that, he is tested in the desert for 40 days. And all of these numbers continue to line up and pattern in the same way. That's other videos. I won't get into it here. But we see our 7, 3, 40, and 12 right there that were developed in Genesis, still being used way downstream here. They're going to be continually helping shroud the template that is being repeated. Yet at the same time, the consistent patterns of repeating numbers and repeating words create a grid for the seeker that really digs into this stuff. You can find the pathway through here, but you got to go through the patterns. Those numbers line up with mining analogs that are happening in Genesis. To me, it's very evident that this is a monomyth story, that there was no Jesus that went. Certainly people traveled all over and shared. Yeah, absolutely. This template is widespread. This teaching is widespread. People know to turn inward. No matter what nationality, no matter what country you are, when you learn to turn inward, you learn peace. When you turn outward and you hang on to the outside, it remains tribal. Now, what I want to say on that, actually, to try to be a little more clear without going into a lot of detail on it, that there's one template that is based on how humans come about, no matter where you come from on the planet. We come a certain way, and we become products of our environment. That's it. We come with certain qualities that we have no control over. But beyond that, we become products of our experiences in life. Everybody, no matter where you are on the planet. And the template is based on that. We get hurt. We have pain. We don't know what to do. We live experiencing life, attaching to what we see. At some point in time, we're trying to learn, or we're hoping to learn, that is what has happened. And that we're living life through the attachments that we've made in life. And that we need to start letting go of those things in order to be free of them. So suddenly, the template is very personal and very interactive at that level. Everything that is the story, the religion, the myth, the next version, the next iteration of the myth is for people to carry. It is a carrier shell. Think of it as if you're reading fables and never understanding that there's a nested lesson in there, that you're believing that it is true or false. Now, that seems like a stretch, because we anthropomorphize animals in fables, and we know that's kind of silly. The talking animals aren't really there. Well, we go to the Bible, we find we have a talking snake and a talking donkey, don't we? So it's not that far away sometimes. The stories exist for different reasons, and there are different genres of them. Some of them are meant to just turn inward, heal yourself. Others are, here is an adventure, a story to carry. We're going to sail from island to island and have all of these adventures along the way, that if you were to look at each adventure, they would sequence on this template if you played it out in here, a grand thing. When you finally cross a threshold to go defeat something dangerous, you've gone into the bad place in your mind where the worst stuff is. You're going to get the golden fleece or something somewhere at the far side of the world, the beginning of the world. 3 and 7 right here. These numbers are all going to be relating to this place on the template before we attached to life. But the outer carrier shells are great and diverse. That's what this video beginning was about. Everybody's teaching that. The ways looking outward are many, 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 many. And the gate is wide. Turning inward, there's one way, and it's towards an inner unity. And I will suggest no matter what your religion is, you will find this template. Well, with one exception. It's not in the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith had no idea. So it's not in the Book of Mormon. You cannot find this inner pathway out using the Book of Mormon. But you can use Hinduism, Buddhism. You can use Greek myth. You can use religion. In different cases, religion, for example, does something different, as does Buddhism and Taoism. Both of those are existing on this template with very sequential steps. However, they also come with lifestyles. You don't have to turn inward and do it. You can live a life of, helping others, of doing things, of doing certain actions that are meant to gradually ease these things and allow you to grow through them and to live a life where you're much more comfortable than feeling in turmoil and angst, grabbing onto things. It teaches you to let go of things and, be more mindful and less so much caught up in the physical world. So they offer lifestyles, not just a teaching to turn inward and heal yourself. They're ways of being as well. when it comes to Abraham material, it is very much the same thing, except that from the template perspective, it is identical. However, the carrying shell suddenly became radically different, because instead of telling you to turn inward and deal with your higher self, it's telling you to turn outward and deal with the God that is out there. And people do that, not knowing that the God is the higher self, that attachment to this and communication with this larger cosmic thing happens up here, not in a physical outward looking thing. It becomes very popular, and anyway, it's a different vehicle, a different arc. Many are the ways outward, looking outward, that many will take, and it's easy. The way inward is hard, and not many are going to do it. That's clear. Everybody tells us that. So for me, I look at Jesus in the same way that I would look at Lao Tzu, the Buddha, or any people like that where these monomyths are coming. There may have been somebody there that held that name, but as far as the story, Noah, Moses, all of that stuff, those are monomyths. Moses, saved at birth, called on the Mount Horeb where he got supernatural aid and also did the denial, struggled to leave the past, plagues, the recycling, this cyclical pain, crossing the threshold into the desert for how long? 40 years. There's another one of the numbers. That these continue to come up so predominantly that at some point you realize what they're doing. But it's hard to see that. You have to read them conceptually. All right. So at the end of the day, I can't say whether anybody named Jesus ever wandered around and, traded ideas back and forth. That's very possible. However, when it comes to Jesus in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you know what those are? They're 3 local variations of one monomyth. They went to a little bit different people. They have different versions in the analogs, but they're still on the template. If you were to look at a Greek myth like the Argonautica, there's about 3 versions. The stuff's kind of broken up, but there's a number of different versions that survived from antiquity. They had variations put into them, but the variations were analogous variations that maintained it on the template. Leaving an island of Amazon women or leaving an island of old gods, and in both cases struggling and they come after you, are conceptually meaning the same things. This represents a place on the template where you're struggling to leave your past. The island of old women represents the island or the place of your old qualities, your characteristics, all the things that you have put inside of you, stored inside of you, that now won't let you leave. The old gods, same things. You try to leave and they come after you. Or think of this as the same places like in the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, where the early gods were created to help out, but it got too raucous and they had to kill them off. That represents our earlier selves coming about, but they've gone bad. We've had to go back and destroy our earlier self. Do you see that conceptually? Matthew, Mark, Luke are the same thing. John, a more aggressive version. Looks like Romans came up with that one. You read them, you can see them that way. So I guess those are my thoughts. I'm not going to say yay or nay on whether somebody went there. Obviously, people were traveling all over and sharing stories and components and making these up in a storytelling culture. So obviously, there's cross-cultural teaching from the people in the know, and that they are, in my assessment, in some cases, they're using probably examples from other material, but in other cases, there's just so much of it that at some point in time, you're going to sound similar to something else. These sound very similar, but they're not exact. If I were to read the Bhagavad Gita leading right up to that, and let me talk about that just for a little bit, because I really don't cover the Bhagavad Gita, and the Hindu material is very thick and it's very deep, and I don't want to spend time with it because I have other stuff right now that is so fascinating to me that I want to resolve it. Okay, let me read this right here. There are terms in here like Dharma, Sankhya, Karma. There's terms in here that we have to identify what they mean as we move along. That's what makes it a little bit thick. part of it. It's just unfamiliar terminology. They're still doing the same thing. Arjuna here in the story is the called one, and Krishna, who is with them, is the higher self that they're working together. And they're having a conversation here. This gets into the part where in chapter 1, Arjuna was going to go to battle to get his land back, which represents the idea that you're going to go destroy whatever it is, your old family. But it's a struggle. He doesn't want to do it in this version. And so he turns it down. And now we get into chapter 2, and actually he's being told by Krishna, Lord Krishna, what to do. These are the words that Lord Krishna spoke to the despairing Arjuna, whose eyes were burning with tears of pity and confusion. This despair and weakness in a time of crisis are mean and unworthy of you, Arjuna. How have you fallen into a state so far from the path to liberation? It does not become you to yield to this weakness. Arise with a brave heart and destroy the enemy. Now, very specifically, when you turn this inward, what we're talking about is what happened. I got this, I got that, I got some kind of pain, shame, hurt that, you know what? It's tucked away. It is not coming out. Guess what? That's your enemy. That's why people don't go after it. They're too scared. I can't admit what happened. I'm too ashamed. Meanwhile, if we would, we'd be okay. So this represents then the higher self talking to the consciousness at a point into the story far enough down where we are failing. We're in our failure mechanism. I'm not making it. I don't know what to do. And the higher self is saying, you big baby. Well, kind of. Arjuna says, how can I ever bring myself to fight Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of reverence? So it goes on to this whole kind of a thing where they're talking about the difficulty in wiping out. What is it that you have in your past that is going to be a struggle? There's a lot to resolve. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and just grab a few things out of here that sound familiar to other material as well. As one abandons worn-out clothes and acquires new ones, so when the body is worn out, a new one is acquired by the self who lives within. Now, in Hindu material, there's the idea of rebirth, reincarnation, but the idea on the template is what? If you go to Jewish material, there isn't reincarnation, but there's template after template after template. Because we know from our own personal experience, once you've washed something off, you feel better. And then later on, you go, if I'm looking for real purity, you're going to keep going. You're not going to just take care of one thing. You're going to take care of something, and then you're going to learn, wow, that really made me feel better. And then time is going to go by, and you're going to realize I've got something else that bothers me. And I already know from experience, if I resolve it, I will feel better. So you will go on this path of repeating over and over again. That is reincarnation. Every time you rebirth, you come back in a new self until you've resolved everything. Then you cease to have to come back for a rebirth. As one abandons worn-out clothes and acquires new ones, physical world, when the body is worn out, a new one is acquired by the self who lives within. This would be like we needed a flood. We had the flood. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and out the other side, there's a new world right there. We've acquired the new self who lives within. Quite honestly, at the end of the flood story, what do we have? Noah, who is us, who went on the journey, is now drunk off of his wine that he made, which means he feels good off of his new life experience. He's naked, uncovered, in his tent, in his life experience. Failure happens. His son's offspring come and cover him up because they're ashamed of him. But he feels good and he's naked, and that's a good thing. That means I'm on the other side, and I'm like, you know what? That thing that used to cover me doesn't cover me anymore. I no longer feel its weight. I want to read this part right here. This is right before the verse I read earlier. I'll put them all together. You have heard the intellectual explanations of the Sankhya, Arjuna. Now listen to the principles of yoga. By practicing these, you can break through the bonds of karma. On this path, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. Okay, we have to change some words here. We got Sankhya. Arjuna, remember, is who we are. I'm going to change Arjuna to me. Sankhya, that is kind of the knowledge of what to do, the supernatural aid. How do you work this? What's the difference between the physical experience and the mental experience? Do you get this before you go on? You have heard the intellectual explanations of Sankhya. You have learned how to do this, Arjuna. You have heard the intellectual explanations of how to do this, Dan. Now listen to the principles of yoga, the path of how to do it. By practicing these, you can break through the bonds of karma, cause and effect, the continuation of things happening. On this path, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. You have to break the cycles. And when you do that, you will progress, even if it's a little bit. You might have to have that cycle broken again and again, but if you're progressing, it should get easier. It'll diminish. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. Let's read it again. You have heard the intellectual explanation of how to figure this out, Dan. Now listen to how you're supposed to do it. You need to break through the bonds, the cause and effect, your experiences that continue to play out. As you do this, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. Keep at it. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. Those who follow this path, resolving deep within themselves to seek me alone, attain singleness of purpose. For those who lack resolution, the decisions of life are many-branched and endless. It's beautiful work. It's dense, it's big, it's thick. I can't go after it because there's too much out there. And I didn't grow up with it. I recognize what's in there. And I will define things in my own ways sometimes. When you're doing this, you have to, and that's okay. I have had Hindu people tell me, you're not defining that right, buddy. You don't know what you're talking about. And there's a point where I have to tell them, I'm sorry, I see something you don't see. It's the same way as if I'm reading the Bible and I'm going, okay, here's a pattern in here. I'm seeing this. These numbers conceptually mean this. They're repeating in this way, which creates that. So righteousness, therefore, means 3 and 7. And a Christian comes along and says, no, you're wrong. That is not what it is. And I'm going to say, you don't know what's there. I'm not arguing with you about what you see. What I see is something you don't. So I have to you have to look at this and go, yeah, there's something different going on. I cannot use your definition. I have to understand that it's something mentally conceptual that I have to make interactive. A fancy word doesn't mean anything to me unless I know that it means, oh, this is my actions. Oh, that karma is cause and effect, and it's happening because of something that I have named at one point in time. I've classified, I've decided I hate that or I love that or something somehow which creates the seed for it to continue to grow and to continue to reemerge. Yeah, they're all teaching the same thing. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I guess I just wanted to cover that, and then that little bit of the Bhagavad Gita on the end. It is really wonderful, but it takes a while to go through it, and if you haven't read it before, it is foreign. In fact, if any of this does get your interest in Hindu material, this is my copy of the Mahabharata. It is completely unnecessary. It is incredibly dense. It's very big. These are pretty complete excerpts from there. These exist. The Bhagavad Gita comes from there. I don't recall which book, 6, I think 5 or 6. At any rate, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita is all you really need to get. There's a lot of repetition in there and a lot of density to it that it would take a lifetime to do it. Or if you grew up with it. I realized in getting it, I got a good sale on this right here, and I was like, oh, I got to get that for future reference, and I'm glad I have it. Honestly, I may never crack all the books. There's just too much elsewhere. I don't have time. There are easier places to find this path. There is one path. Some people have got it fairly plain language, and other people have got it very obscured. You want it most plain language? Go to the Stoics. Stop getting angry. Let go of your issues. Be happy. Don't waste your time. Get rid of all of the stuff in life that is unimportant to you. Remain happy. Do those things. Bingo. Plain language. That's kind of for the scientists, though. Most humans need something big and blown up to live their lives by. Okay. Hope the video was fun. I'm sure it's different. I can't say yay or nay. I can say, I see something else. At the end of the day, you realize you're chasing something different here. I have been told by Christians as I do my interpretation or as they, hear me do something, call it New Age. And of course, what I'm doing isn't New Age. New Age is something different. New Age is still something supernatural, and I'm not. I'm finding the core template. Actually, every religion and myth is New Age. The template is based on the life of a human. So before we understood this process, we were living it nevertheless. Yeah. At some point, you learn it and you figure out that we're emerging from a hurt place and we're trying to get to a place where we're not hurt. Not everybody does. How do those of us that are hurt get to where we have better lives, where we don't feel the way? Yeah, life isn't fair, is it? We're born where we're born. What are we going to do about it? It's a real issue. This material gives us hope for anybody that can find their way through it. I have. That's how I know the path. I took it from a childhood of abuse. Okay, hope the video was fun and interesting. Yep, you know what? I'll tell you what traveled. This template is everywhere. Because somebody here and somebody here knew it, and you can kind of see the overlap is meaningless. At some point you realize, oh, it was known all over the place, and the overlap is all over. You just have to learn how to read it conceptually. Bingo. The material is what traveled. Take care. See you in the next video.